As utterly bonkers as House of Cards gets, there's something about its sumptuous cinematography and the masterfully feline performances of Kevin Spacey and Robin Wright that just keep me coming back for more. I wasn't a huge fan of Season 4's division of Frank and Claire, especially when the first two seasons had so solidified the Underwoods versus the world dynamic as something both morally murky and undeniably entertaining. Season 5 sees the couple still in a very uneasy position, and though their bonds are strengthened in the face of a common enemy, Joel Kinnaman's Republican frontrunner poses a significant threat to the Underwoods' position in the White House when it comes to the election. Frank and Claire find themselves tested in new ways through this new set of 13 episodes. And just so you know, there are going to be a few spoilers within. To be honest, the battle with Conway is one of the best parts of the season. As Conway pulls ahead in the polls, the Underwoods take voter suppression to the extreme, fabricating a terrorist plot to put armed soldiers on the streets and create heavily policed focal stations for voting. Frank goes a step further, putting pressure on governors to shut down election day polling early and transforming a countrywide election into a complete circus. 9 weeks pass with two states, Ohio and Pennsylvania, unable to certify the results, creating an impasse between two candidates, neither of whom have enough votes to claim victory. And under these bright lights, Will Conway begins to unravel. The presidency has come so very, very close to being his, and yet it remains just out of reach. And Kinnaman's downward spiral as he begins to lash out is terrific stuff. What seemed inevitable to us as much to him is twisted and warped brilliantly. It helps that Spacey is back monologuing directly to the camera once more in almost every episode, divulging little footnotes and appendices to his political machinations and welcoming us back into the privilege of his confidence. But it seems like there was a missed opportunity here to have a new dynamic president with Claire as an opposition VP and Francis on the outside looking in. With House of Cards having lost a bit of its edge since Frank supplanted Walker as the supposed leader of the free world, setting him back on the outside, forcing him to wheel and deal once more to regain power and discredit a new complex and thoroughly modern opponent could have been truly interesting. And this, coupled with Claire's role as a Democrat VP to a Republican president, would have certainly broken new ground for the show. And unfortunately for the Underwoods and for us as viewers, instead of kicking onto new territory, Season 5's writers dredge up the past. So it is that the death of Zoe Barnes comes up once more, and investigations into the disappearance of Rachel Posner are once again on the agenda. And while it makes sense perhaps for these storylines to rear their heads again, they kind of just fizzle out. It's kind of just marking time. In many ways, Season 5 feels like it's sort of treading water. Basically, there are very few consequences for these old actions, even if the tensions wrought by Herald journalist Tom Hammerschmidt's investigation do at least create some tension along the way. To be honest, the biggest threat comes from within the party. Democratic Congressman Alex Romero begins pursuing an investigation into the Underwood administration that can only end with impeachment. Right up until the penultimate episode, it looks like the show is about to kick the Underwoods out of the White House, but of course there is a twist, only this time the twist is just face-palm-inducingly absurd, even by House of Cards standards. It's all been planned, Frank suggests. He and Doug have been orchestrating this thing for months. The president himself is the leak. All he needed to do was push Kathy Durant down some stairs and resign, handing Claire the perfect platform for her own tenure as the first female president, and allowing Frank to pull strings in the private sector, which is where the real power is, apparently. I have real trouble with the whole Kathy situation. The Secretary of State is threatening to testify, everything is lined up perfectly, and yet she just happens to fall down the stairs in the company of a man suspected of murder, corruption, and a whole lot more. Were there no cameras? Was there no inquiry? At some point, she'll wake up. Then what happens? "You will fall, Kathy," intones Frank. He looks at the camera, giving us a little side-eye, but House of Cards is better than this obvious absurdity. This is just too sloppy for the Francis Underwood we've come to know and loathe, love. I'm not entirely sure. The same can be said of the deaths of Tom Yates. I mean, really? No one's going to notice the disappearance of the famous author embedded with the Underwoods for a year or two? And Leanne Harvey, which is, a real shame, because I thought she was a much-needed breath of fresh air on the show. Perhaps most noticeable is the complete lack of ideology. In fact, one of the characters goes so far as to note this of the Underwoods. They have no real explained goals beyond power. And while Frank might quote Gore Vidal as saying, "Power is an end in itself," that doesn't quite cut it when you have a TV show trying to address relevant topics like terrorism, migration, the closing of borders, the Syrian crisis, Russian interference in Western democracy, and so on. Part of the reason that Will Conway feels so very fresh is that the Underwoods' lack of belief in anything apart from power has kind of become a little bit stale. The show is still yet to answer the question, where do we go from here, that was posed as soon as Francis became president. If there is a silver lining, perhaps it's that it's to be hoped that Frank's escapades in season 6 might lead to more episodes like the cultish Elysian Fields episode. In this one, Frank ditches the White House for a weekend in the woods, making pithy remarks and wading into confrontational conversations with the nation's richest and most powerful elites. And it's a great episode. It marks a welcome turn of pace and change of scenery. Another bright spark is Patricia Clarkson's Jane Davis. Now, Davis is an international liaison with a flair for manipulation that might even surpass that of the Underwoods, and Clarkson's performance is one of the standouts of the season, which is saying a huge amount. This is a show where the acting quality has always been absolutely top-notch, but Clarkson's soft delivery, her unflappable, gentle concern, these make her character's audacious machinations a joy to behold. She walks a tightrope between the genuine and the duplicitous, and Davis proves to be one of the trickier characters for us as audience members to figure out. It's brilliant. So I just want to round out with a few little fragmented thoughts as well on season 5. I mean, for me, Doug is wasted in this season. I love Doug. He's one of my favourite characters. Michael Kelly is superb, but he was kind of sidelined in this one, simply barking at people, and then took the ultimate fall. Okay, not quite the ultimate fall. Kathy, that one goes to you. But he really takes a bullet for Frank towards the end of the season, and this would have been a perfect season to really tug at the threads of his and Frank's relationship, see how strained that could get, or even get a new perspective with Conway in the White House and Frank on the outside and Doug doing goodness knows what. How does he survive? That would be a really interesting thing to explore. Alas, we got none of that, and I can't help but feel that Doug, who is, one of my favourite characters, I know he's a fan favourite, deserved better. I liked the relationship between Jane Davis and Mark Usher. I wish that had been brought out a little more. There was great potential there for season 6, even if Usher's suggestion of himself as Claire's VP was quite easy to spot a mile away. Tom Yates is a problem in this season. The whole Claire and Tom thing made no sense to me. It was just bad, and it was a waste of a character. Tom had been a really useful window into the lives of the Underwoods, our representative in that world in many ways, but this season he was kind of a ghost at the feast without adding anything in that role at all. I really didn't mind that they killed him off in the end. In fact, I really liked the way that Claire did it. It kind of just illustrated the cold brutality of her character even more. Although I think there is a danger of Claire turning into Francis. I hope that doesn't really happen. It's going to be really interesting to see those two kind of, move against one another potentially. But I do wish that sort of Tom's death had almost come earlier. It might have been more impactful that way. So yeah, season 5, not a vintage season at all. But hell, I'm going to be watching season 6. I mean, the performances are just too good. Spacey and Wright are too good to not tune in, quite frankly. I'll be following House of Cards as far as it goes. So yeah, those are just a few of my thoughts. How about you guys? What did you guys make of season 5 of House of Cards? There are a few clickables up at the side of my head here. Make sure you subscribe, follow, check me out on Facebook, Fuzzy Pixels Official, and Twitter @FuzzyPixels, and I'll see you very soon.